Let's see. And also, out of this sense of basic sanity, obviously, we're very adaptable and flexible. This is one of the precept of adaptability in flexibility in the 21 precepts of tantric practice, which also can be downloaded for free off the website if you can ever get through. I think the downloading a document's easier than the video streaming at this stage until the next website gets made, completed. So actually, as I wrote this in notes for myself, it actually is true that all of the 21 precepts are naturally coming out more as you gain a deeper experience of basic sanity. It just stands to reason. Those are all based on virtues. And basic sanity, if nothing else, is a deeper immersion into you and a deeper evocation and manifestation of your innate virtues, right? Because that's what we are in essence. So adaptable and flexible, you'll see this characteristic in people that are basically sane. They're not going to flip out. If you look at this, even whole cultures can adopt this. I think there's a great example in the book Collapse. Who's read the book Collapse by Jared Diamond? Oh, tisk tisk. Read, folks. Get out of the TV and the WeChat. Get a book called Collapse by Jared Diamond and read about Iceland and Greenland. Both pioneered by Viking-type people, right? Greenland had a population already. I think Iceland didn't have a population, as far as I remember. But the significant thing is, the Greenland people decided as a whole culture, even though they came from exactly the same culture in Norse when they left Norway and Denmark, they decided in Greenland that they were going to stick with the rules of their culture in Denmark and Norway rather than adapt to the situation in Greenland. Now, if you've ever seen Greenland, it's anything but green, right? It's white, it's kind of blue ice. I don't know if you ever flew over it. It's gorgeous. If you ever on that night flight or whatever, just get up and have a look out that window, that little round window at the door, you know, where you're always thinking the door's going to open, I'm going to fly out. So go to that little window. Don't lean on it, of course, and do your stretching. But look out that window. Look down at Greenland. It is gorgeous. It is hundreds of feet of ice, and it's blue. And But anyway, it was anything but green. Those people that came there did not adapt to the environment whatsoever and didn't ask the natives how they adapt very well, you know. And then the same genetic people, same cultural people, same time period went to Iceland. For some reason, those very forward-thinking Vikings said, we're going to die if we don't do something different, you know. So they got there and they developed like some of the world's first permaculture because they realized that Iceland had 1 millimeter of topsoil. It just gets blown away because it's all hard rock and this volcanic thing. So they found ways to cultivate topsoil and create topsoil composting and da-da-da-da. So they basically adapted. They said, well, you know, my class of people in Norway and Denmark, we weren't allowed to eat waterfowl. That was low-class food, you know. Oh, well, shit, that's all there is. We better eat it, you know. So they said, maybe we better even farm it and grow more of it, right? Because it grows well here or whatever. So they did like this, right? Certain fish you couldn't eat and da-da-da. So they adapted and they thrived and made a really great country. Whereas the Greenland Vikings just pissed everybody off, all the natives over the decades they were there, and didn't do well. They were all like starving, dwindling in numbers. They were mean and nasty. Every Indians that came to visit them, you know, Inuits, they were killing them. And that was not a good way to make friends with the locals. And eventually the locals just ganged up and said, we need to get rid of this cancer. And they ganged up and killed them all. That was the end of it. But they couldn't survive anyway. They just couldn't adapt. So basic sanity is interesting. And you see it really illustrated in this case of the Icelandic Vikings versus the Greenland ones. It's kind of neat. That's on a whole cultural basis, imagine. But individually, we have to have that adaptability, that flexibility. Not for the purpose of survival. You know, it's much nobler to die in certain situations than to survive. I would definitely choose death over lots of situations that other people choose life for. I can't understand it. But, you know, death before dishonor definitely rings true in my heart. But, you know, besides that, you just have to have a sense of basic sanity that shows up as adaptability, even in cases that aren't about survival, right? Just simple adaptability. And I think we covered it a little bit, but in basic sanity, we would only be, as we're cultivating more and more basic sanity, one lens of perception we can put on this cultivation is that we're producing punya shakti, or punya karma. So the activities that are good for all beings. so that all of our activities are only good for all beings. So we can't put anything into the selfish category anymore. The papam shakti, papam karma, right? Well, but I'm choosing to have a pizza. Is that good for all beings or not? Okay, don't get crazy about it. Have the damn pizza, you know. Well, I'm choosing to make love with my boyfriend or my girlfriend. Is that good for all beings or not? Well, Tantra handled that and the pizza one. They used to say, make sure you're just in a prayerful way, either really doing the prayer, which these prayers exist, or doing it in your heart. I offer the pleasure and enjoyment of this sexual moment of dalliance with my lover, so that all beings may also feel this, knowing that I don't own pleasure. And that pleasure is a universal experience. Right? I offer the eating of this pizza and the nourishment that it will give me, and the lovely feeling of fullness and satisfaction and connection to the lovely sheep that made the cheese and the plant and the tomato from the earth, so that all beings can feel nurtured and really nourished and loved and blah, blah, blah. That's what we pray all the time. So there really is no selfish act anymore. Pooping, we know how satisfying that can feel, but instead of owning it on a personal level, it's feeding everything that needs to eat that stuff. How wonderful. You know what I mean? Everything. So we have this way of only performing punya, or meritorious activities of body, speech, and mind. No more selfish if we're going towards basic sanity. And the great thing is we have choice, and we can invoke that immediately. When someone says, well, you know, I can't, all my activities, I just can't. I still don't like him and like her, and I'm going to still do shit to them. That, you know, it's true, right? Even if they don't say it out loud, it's what people still do. That is no excuse. You just have no excuse for that. Because as a human being, you can make a choice. So only meritorious good things for others, right? That maybe don't have a financial benefit all the time. Great. Or a payoff, right? Okay. Now, 100% responsibility for your actions is also a part of basic sanity. 100% responsibility actually for what happens to you too. For your actions of body, speech, and mind, and for what happens to you. 100%. 100, not 99.9, 99, 100%. No blame, no shame either. It's very important. No blame, no shame. Shame doesn't exist for a person with basic sanity. It's not possible. Guilt may. Guilt is when you go against your own value system. That's good to have a guilty feeling. Yeah, that wasn't so right. I went against my values. Shame, that someone can make you feel bad about something that they think is their value system, which you don't. No. And no blame. Right? But 100% responsibility for how you feel, what you do, what you say, how you respond to things, if you react, 100%. No, oh, I was drunk. I'm sorry, honey. I cheated on you because I was so wasted, and she just made me do it. Did you ever hear those stories? It probably doesn't happen in Spain and Argentina. But in America, it's constant, isn't it? I heard this growing up a lot. You never heard that kind of stuff either? I was so drunk, that's why I did it. No? Only my neighborhood? People got so drunk that they, huh?
I went to college.
Yeah, right? I heard this all the time. You're like looking at me like, where are you from? So yeah, you'd hear this. Any way we can shirk responsibility. It was dark, you know, whatever it was, I don't know. Felt like you, I don't know. So we can make light of it. But people doing this all the time, you know, shirking responsibility. What was the latest one I was just talking about? Coffee.
Oh, this morning, the worker.
Oh yeah. Terrible. You know, but we go back to the old McDonald's thing. I order a hot coffee, it burns me, so I sue McDonald's and I win. Oh, please. So in Japan, somebody in Japan just won a settlement for $500,000 US against their employer, a restaurant owner, because the employer made them work long hours and they committed suicide. How is it the employer's responsibility for that person committing suicide because that person chose to work the long hours that the employer wanted them to work? I don't care how much damn manipulation and leverage you put on me. If I don't want to do it, I ain't going to do it, and I ain't going to certainly kill myself over it. But Japan, they like to kill themselves. They have a history of killing themselves over things just to make a point. So, you know, anyway, so the family goes to court and gets American-style settlement. What happened? Japan used to be a place where people had personal responsibility. Holy smokes. The whole world's losing this. So basically the whole world's losing basic sanity as something to be valued. Have you noticed? Yeah. So we look at all these parameters. We see that the world really likes the opposite. More emotional drama, more TV series, more movies getting caught up in it, more non-responsibility, more projection of my world on you, and you have to cop to it. It's amazing, and it's becoming institutionalized, isn't it? So I was shocked by this Japanese settlement recently, really shocked. Just the other day they settled this thing. I was like, wow. And then Sukalia brought up like all these ethical considerations around it, which are good to talk about and good to get out there. Oh yeah, they are partly responsible. There should be laws that protect workers about, well, there should be laws that protect workers about you're not allowed to work with some toxic chemicals, so you're so desperate in a situation that you would work with toxic chemicals, because people will, if they're that desperate for money, right? We see this in third world countries all the time, right? Here, India, Brazil, Appalachia in America, you know, it's not just everywhere that's third world. So, yeah, some protection has to be there. But it's all gray area. Do you make a law? Well, you can't work more than 60 hours a week in a restaurant unless you have a special contract you sign that says you willingly take these hours and you won't sue anybody after you die from doing, you know, after you commit suicide. My family will not come back. So it gets all kind of crazy, doesn't it? So personal responsibility just takes care of all that. Done. Republican. Republican. The real kind. So personal responsibility. Yeah? 100% responsibility for everything that you ever have done, body, speech, or mind, past, present, future. That's it. Handle that. If you actually do that, you're more enlightened than 99% of the people on the planet. Period. Spiritual development-wise, psychological development-wise, you're already bang. I didn't do it. I love that one. Then the last one is, last concept before we have any questions is cohesion of body, speech, and mind. You know? So in basic sanity at the highest levels, we sort of touched on this with someone who was overweight, but was cultivating a mental kind of basic sanity, right? That's fine. But is it pervading your body? Not just its physical health, but its conduct, how you conduct yourself. Yeah? Is it pervading your feeling sense, your energy, the virtues? Body, speech, and mind. Energy of speech is actually virtue energy, not emotions in Tantra. That's not the energy that's being talked about in Tantra. It's virtues. So are you cultivating virtues, right? Are you just thinking good thoughts, or are you actually cultivating the energy of the virtue and the embodied experience of the virtue and the conduct that would flow out from it? See, that cohesion is very high order of basic sanity, right? And that cohesion we see starting to show up around stage 7 or stage 8. Follow? Okay. Do you finish the beer because you paid for it? You know, make sure you get your buzz while you walk home 15 minutes to keep you going the rest of the way. One more slug and I'll make it buzzed all the way home before I go to bed. I remember when I started to really check in with my natural appetites when I was younger. I was in my teens doing this, and we'd be at a bar, 18 or 19 years old, down at the Jersey Shore with these big Weiss beer, big German Weiss beers. I never saw beers that big at that age. And we were drinking these things. I'm like, I'm getting this sense that I don't even want to finish this thing. And I would just stop. My friends would be like, why aren't you finishing? How could you not? What are you, a wussy? You know, wasting money. No, I just don't really want it. So you don't get a lot of support for exploring your natural appetites, as you've probably noticed in the world, right? Honey, I just don't think that when we got married when I was 20 and you were 19, that we really knew who we were. And we're really different people now. And I think we need to move on, you know. Because you developed your natural appetites over the last 10 years and you realize, what was I thinking, you know? Oh, I wasn't, that's right, I wasn't, you know. Okay, and you got to move on. So things like this, I think, are very natural developments. You know? Any questions or comments, clarifying especially on basic sanity, clarifying questions, especially those questions we love to entertain where they are relevant to your actual process rather than speculative or theoretic. Worse, rhetorical for my own consideration. Do you have anything you'd like to?
You were talking about, you know, the connection between energy of thought, arising of emotion, identification with that process, and then its visceral react or consequence. Right?
Yeah.
So emotions, are they not, though to a certain degree, of their natural arising? At
Absolutely.
a certain degree of all of the so-called negative emotions we would describe are part of the human process.
Yeah. And like most things that are negative or entropy-inducing in human life, you sort of want to have them for very short moments instead of long ones or ways of life.
Right.
Like no one, I think, in the world today, in the last 10,000 years since war began, would doubt that war is a necessary evil these days. Necessary evil. These days, groups of people get to the point where they can't agree anymore. And they disagree about something and they just want to physically sort it out. Okay, now that's not really smart. It's not really wise. Certainly cooler heads could prevail and always sort those things out, but they don't. So if you have to have a war, you have a war. Now if you're the one who doesn't want to have the war, but someone's making the war against you, you have to go back at them, otherwise they just run over your whole home and take your family, whatever, your country. You have to defend. So when you defend, though, you do it hard as you can, fast as you can, brutal as you can, and you get it over right away. Just like one of my matches. You just want to get it over, brutalize them, get it over, because afterwards you're back to what humanity is really about, which is love and caring and rebuilding and taking care. You know, we were in Japan recently and I was saying to a student, we just dropped bombs on these people when we knew the war was over. Not little bombs, hydrogen bombs. We knew the war was over already, they already surrendered. The plane's in the air, too late, drop it anyway, Sam. I mean, you know, wow, that's just wrong. That's just wrong, right? So, but then we did the right thing as the United States of America, went in and rebuilt the country quickly, powerfully, and it got back on its feet and became one of the world powers economically. So, you know, you want to make reparations really quickly. Same thing with emotions. When the emotions are there that are negative, fear could be a survival moment. You need that fear to get the chemicals in your bloodstream to run faster than the German Shepherd on your block. Okay, fair enough. Or the hoodies chasing you with daggers and guns. But whatever it is. But you really don't want to have that all the time, right? And it definitely causes damage to body tissues.
So it's more finding, identifying, recognizing clearly the subtle emotional states that are completely ongoing that give rise to these abrupt moments of loss of control,
Yeah.
sanity.
But even in a case where fear is helping your survival, if you get to a place of basic sanity, you may not have to generate fear to generate the exact same survival response with the same intensity.
Right.
So that's also where we want to go.
So action becomes non-emotional dependent.
Yep. We want action to be non-emotional dependent, even when it's spontaneously arising emotion. But having said that, there are naturally arising emotions like joy,
Sure.
you know, and so on. And anger as a naturally arising emotion is not always bad if it's short. Of course, it always, even for the moment, you're getting negative tissue damage, but it can serve a wider, bigger picture, which can result in much more health, much more harmony, much more whatever. Anger at the right moment is clarity. The virtuous expression of the contracted emotion of anger is clarity. So in basic sanity, we're much more in touch with the clarity and less in touch with the anger generated by some karmic conditioning or dualistic experience of how my self-image was damaged and now I'm getting angry back at you, or how my expectations were damaged because you didn't do X, Y, Z or did X, Y, Z, and I'm going to get angry at you, right? So a teacher often, a Dharma teacher, can sometimes use anger as a tool of clarity to cut through and wake somebody up. Of course, that person has to be open to receiving it. It could also, they could just be damaged or get angry against it, you know, and spend years like that. It's often the case when a student cries abuse from a spiritual teacher being really strong with them, I always reflect on what would have happened to Milarepa if he thought Marpa, his teacher, was just angry. Yeah, right? Because maybe Marpa was just angry. Maybe he was crazy beating him and being angry all day. But that didn't matter, and it still doesn't matter in a teacher-student dynamic. It only matters what Milarepa, us as Milarepa, what our experience is. Do I take it as anger that's against me personally, or do I hear every single thing that comes as some type of uplifting thing for me to work with that can transform me? And I've always taken that approach. Coach, guru, my coaches, my guru, mentor, anything was always that approach. Because if you don't, what else will you got? What else have you got? Your own small judgmental self that doesn't grow. Could even be worse. Could feel abused, damaged, angry. Could form a whole self-image around it. Could then really form an image of another being around it. No growth, right? So I think this is a really worthy thing to explore. Okay, anything? All good? Yeah? Okay.
I understand the example with anger being expressed as a virtue of clarity, but I'm just thinking about like grief and sadness, and that there's a place for all emotions.
Sure.
So, I mean, is there some virtue
Sure.
being expressed? What is this
Yeah,
like?
as long as it's spontaneous and not karmically caused, it will always be an expression that has a proper place.
Okay.
In that proper place, it means that some people might be touched by it. So there's some ripple effect that's beneficial. Not to mention, since it's spontaneously coming out, this emotion, for you, it's appropriate in that moment. It's only when you grasp on it and you turn sadness into a cultural identity, like Ukrainians, and keep it going for like 500 years. Now, I know Ukrainians got their butt whipped by every single country around them for 500 years. You got a lot to be sad about, you know. But, and that's kind of tough, but, so a tough example, but what if you didn't have to have that expression? Just like, well, that's just how the cookie crumbled for now. You know, I don't have to have I don't have to have an identity with it or whatever. But when sadness and grief comes out authentically, there's a beauty with it. And it touches everybody. You know, I'm often thinking of this story when people bring this up, of Dingo Khyentse Rinpoche and Dudjom Rinpoche. They're over at a woman's house who's the sponsor of their teachings. Big tantric cats doing big tantric Dzogchen teachings back in the 60s and 70s in America, when no one knew what the hell it was, really, or could appreciate it. And they're doing these teachings at a woman's house. And the woman, and they said to her, "It's so marvelous. We thank you so much for hosting these teachings here. You're getting such good karma, good merit for doing it." Because this woman hosted like free teachings for everybody. So she gave them the house to do it in. She gave the teachers money to come and do it, which is how it was done in the old days. Teachings would be sponsored in the old days. Now we run courses because everybody's forgotten how to get merit. So no one sponsors a teaching anymore, which is really sad, I think, actually. It really is. It's deep. So anyway, there they are at an old-fashioned sponsored course. American lady, 2 Tibetan teachers. Wow, 50 people come, they're getting this teaching. And they said, well, we wanted to tell you how wonderful this is, and we're so happy that this is happening this way, and we're in great gratitude that the Buddha Dharma could come out like this, and blah, blah, blah. And she says, oh, it's no big deal. It's no big deal. I had all this money extra, you know. No, because my mother just died. She just died really recently, so it's no problem. I had all this money. And they're like, oh, and they become real concerned. I'm so sorry to hear that. And she goes, no, don't worry, I hated her. And they went, oh, and they started crying. They had like little tears come out. And she's like, oh, you did? And they're crying. She goes, don't cry. I really hated her. And they're like, oh, and they start crying more, you know. She's trying to convince them how much she really hated her mother, and it didn't really matter, and they just kept getting hit with it. The spontaneous offering of grief and sadness around this person who hated the being who gave them precious human birth, right? So to Tibetans, that's like a horrible thing, because what they trained their whole life about what? Every human being on the planet was your mother at one time, you know, doing prostrations to everybody. This is a big thing they try to get you to focus on when you do Tibetan Buddhist practice. So for them, it was just shocking and horrifying that the mother that you did have in this lifetime, you hated, you know. So all of a sudden they felt terrible when they cried. Well, those tears had effect, powerful effect on the other people who were in that meeting, in that room, you know. Funny enough, they didn't pierce her, which is interesting. But apparently the story, the way I heard it was, because I wasn't around, was that it affected the other people. So emotion, negative emotion, you know, but it wasn't sustained, right? And it was let pass, because nothing is grasped by a master of life, right? Just basic Sanity, just comes and it goes, and you're back to an expectation, right? Good? Okay. Hopefully that helps you understand basic Sanity, and you can apply it in your life right away.